Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to share with you some book recommendations. So Women in Translation Month is coming up in August, and I thought I would take the time to share some Swedish women in translation that you could be reading in English. I've chosen specifically books that are available in English translation, even though there's tons of Swedish books that are available in other languages. The first one is an author that is very popular and very well known, but the book itself isn't as much, and that is Anteckningar från en ö, or the English title is Notes from an Island by Tove Jansson. I will put the information about the English translators in the description. Since I haven't read them in the translations, I don't know who translated these books, so I will put that information in the description. Tove Jansson is a Finnish-Swedish author. This book is a non-fiction book, basically journal entries from the year that she and her female partner built a house on an island. And a lot of the journal entries are regarding the building of the house and some of the challenges and obstacles that came in the process of doing that, how they interact with the other people on the island. But it's also just about island life, and there is a sense of honesty and sort of an unglamorous way of looking at island life, like a postcard type thing on island life, living in very close proximity to nature and being guided in your everyday by the weather. There is a sense of melancholy, I think, in this book as well, that you can probably sense it comes from an aging perspective and thinking about and considering aging. I thought this was really good, so I would strongly recommend picking that one up. The next recommendation I have is a book I read last year, really loved, and it got an English translation this year. It's called Don't Forget Me in the English, or the Swedish original title is Glöm allt men inte mig by Filomena Grandin. This is written by an actress who I was familiar with through her acting, but this book is about her relationship with her father. Her father owned a music shop in Stockholm, I think. And he was kind of a legend in the sort of underground music scene. He had quite a legacy behind him. And this book is both about growing up with her father in her childhood and some of the really charming bits of living with a person like this. Because he was such a free spirit, some of the things that wasn't there in her childhood. But also it looks very closely at the last few years of her father's life when his health is deteriorating and she is chronicling that process, both their relationship and his aging, as well as the grief process. And this is just a really heartfelt memoir with really beautiful writing that I would love more people to read. I think the father-daughter relationship was just so honest, no filters with the struggles in particular, but also there's no doubt that there was a lot of love in this relationship. Being able to look at the limitations of someone you loved so much. There is courage in that, I think. The next one is another recent read for me, that is Solo by Dana Sedrovsky. The original title is Separat. And this is a kind of My Year of Rest and Relaxation novel where the protagonist has decided to step away from society. She lives in complete isolation in her apartment, and this book is sort of similar to the premise of My Year of Rest and Relaxation in the isolation and in the detachment of the protagonist. However, I would say that the protagonist in Separat is much more, she's very active in her mind. She is introspective, she is passing judgment on the world around her. Even though she is living in isolation, living away from people, she is still sort of in her mind connected to people because she continues to think about them and, as I said, pass judgment and have opinions about what is going on outside her house. I think it's a really interesting, introspective book about loneliness and living alone and what can happen when you have no family or friends that bind you to the earth. The next recommendation I have is a book I read last year and really enjoyed. It's called Inlandet or Inlands by Elin Willows, and this author also has a more recent publication that I absolutely loved, but it hasn't got an English translation yet. Hopefully it will at some point. But Inlandet is about a woman who moves from Stockholm to the northern parts of Sweden to follow her boyfriend there and to live together. But the relationship ends as soon as she moves there, and she decides to stick around. I think she kind of dares herself to see what happens if she tries to make this new place her home. And this village where she moves to there's a very limited population. Most people who live there have lived there for generations, and very rarely does someone move to that place, rather they would move away from it. And so nothing much happens in this village, and nothing much happens in her life. And this book is a very quiet book about her every day trying to make this new place her home. I found this to be quite comforting to read because of its refusal to give any major turning points to the protagonist's life. It's just sort of about her keeping on. The last of my recommendations is a poetry collection, and that is White Blight or Vit Svit by Athena Farrokhzad. This poetry collection is about being an immigrant, about family, about identity, about trauma, inherited trauma in particular, and generational trauma, language. There are several voices present in this book. There is the mother, the father, the brother, the grandmother, the grandfather, I think, an aunt and uncle, possibly. So there are several family members whose voices is in this book. And the format of the poems are usually that someone said, and the voice or the narrator of the poems reflects on what has been said by someone else, and is constantly in a sort of situating herself to other people's opinions. There's sort of constellations of thoughts, of opinions, of the family dynamics in these poems. So, for example, there is poems about the adjusting to a new country. The mother will say something about where they come from and what she should do in the new place, and there's sort of an answer echoing from the narrator of the poem in how she responds or what she thinks about these other voices and what they have to say. And I think the chorus in this book, the way you see all of these different vantage points, the different experiences that people have based on who they are, even if they have the same sort of overall experience of immigrating. It is a really fantastic poetry collection that hasn't really left me since I read it last year, and that I would urge everyone to pick up. I also wanted to mention a bonus recommendation for those of you who can read in German. This might be available in Spanish as well, but I remember specifically seeing this has got a new German translation, and that is Norrtullsligan by Elin Wagner. The German title for this is Die Sekretärinnen, which I probably completely butchered, which is published by Echo Verlag. And the German translation that I'm mentioning came out in May, so it's a very recent publication. And I wanted to mention it in case you can read in German, because I really love this book, and I hope that someday we'll get an English translation. It is kind of a novella of working women in the turn of the century in Sweden, and it's following a group of women who live together and they work in various office jobs, and it's about their struggles, various pretty bad working conditions, sexual harassment in the office, of poverty, of not having enough money to afford their rent, their needs, of love and marriage and rights. Even though it tackles a lot of heavier topics and struggles that these women face, it's also really funny. And there's definitely a sense of support and love in this group of women that I also really, really liked. So there's that one. So those were the books I wanted to recommend to you for some Swedish women in translation. I hope that if you pick any of these up that you will enjoy them. Also feel free to recommend me some Women in Translation Month books or authors. I'm always very interested in those. And that was all I wanted to say for today. Hope you're doing really well and you're taking care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon.